Rethinking artificial. As Maxim noted, I have been a woman in tech my entire career. I've had many interesting conversations with people about the future of tech. Myself, along with Amy and some other extraordinary leaders in the space, Mike, Maxim, and others, we are always very optimistic about where the future is going. About 3 months ago, over maybe 2 bottles of wine, okay, I got into an interesting argument with somebody about this acronym that has actually been around for a few decades. It's artificial intelligence, which has, of course, captivated everybody's imagination. And we were chatting about ChatGPT, and we were saying, okay, so what is it good, is it bad, is it evil, what's going to happen? And I said, I actually don't think there's anything artificial about artificial intelligence. And that's when I started to think about, well, what is intelligence anyway, right? When was the last time we really stopped and thought, okay, what is intelligence? And for many, especially philosophers, old and new, will think that intelligence is the area of humans, right? The ability to be logical, to be cognitive, to be creative. But if you think about intelligence being fundamentally about being able to problem solve, to be creative, to be intentional about something, to be driving towards an outcome, maybe there's a new way for us to think about intelligence. And after I speak today, I would love for you to bear in mind what the Hindu and Buddhist religions think about the third eye. How many of you know about the third eye or have seen it, yeah? My partner, who some of the people in the room here know, Chris, he has been working so hard to associate what he understands the third eye to be with the pineal gland, which is a gland that's in the middle of your head that scientists can't quite explain, but Chris is convinced that it is access to the third eye, which is about insight and intuition. The third eye being a source of intelligence. I would love to talk about the three eyes. So the third eye, but the 3 eyes I want to talk about today is innovation, rethinking intelligence, and inspiration. I'm smiling so hard that my face is about to break in this photo, but that's me with my beloved Cupid doll. I born and raised in Japan, Japanese father, German mother, Helga and Masujiro. The fact that they met and had me, I've already won the lotto. I don't need to buy a lotto ticket ever. And then that's my brother Mario. Yes, I know, Italian name, German, Japanese family. We're the Axis powers in the house. And so I was born into what you might call a progressively revolutionary conservative family. As you can tell from this, my mother was very much about the tradition. Now, if you look really closely, I kind of look like a mafia boss. I have my hand on my belly and I'm gaze of 1,000 yards or whatever that phrase is. And so the reason why I bring this up is because how did I go from this half Eurasian kid, born and raised in Japan, which, by the way, Japan just fell on the world rankings around women's status in society and politics and leadership. It's shocking, but thankfully my mother, being a very progressive German mom, she was a great model for me. But how did I go from this and go into the world of technology, where I've worked for companies like NVIDIA before anybody knew how to spell it, let alone pronounce it with how it's spelled. I've worked for Sony, I've worked for Accenture, I've worked for a handful of startups because I moved to Silicon Valley in 2006, and if you live there for 4 years, they will kick you out unless you go work for a startup. And that's actually how I had the chance to go into XR. I ended up working with an XR startup, had the extraordinary opportunity to meet people like Miss Amy Peck and others. And so the question is, how did that happen? And it happens from innovation, but it happens from innovation from within first. We're so focused on innovation on the outside that we forget to innovate from within. I will make the argument with anybody over however many bottles of wine that the whole agile process of writing software and code, that needs to apply to yourself first. How do you build, measure, learn yourself as a human being? We get to reinvent ourselves, and as Andy just spoke about, and I'm sorry I missed the morning part of this conference, but I'm sure this came up time and time again, we live in a time where we have an opportunity to reinvent ourselves, and how do you innovate? And for me, it really was about taking on breathtaking challenges. Now, I know this looks dangerous. This is actually in Bulgaria, and I'm a rock climber. And that isn't only because I've been sort of used to taking on jagged edges and overcoming all kinds of challenges. One thing that I will note, if any of you have been to the rock garden in Varna in Bulgaria, I will say yes, the floor is actually right here. So, yeah, not truly too death-defying, but my point is, the metaphor here is that I just love the idea of hanging in a balance and encountering jagged edges and taking physics, because how many of you rock climbers? Any other rock climbers here? Yeah? So for those of you who are not rock climbers, it might be easy to think that it's about strength, that it's about upper body strength. It's physics, right? It's physics and torque. How do you maneuver yourself? How do you find the right points of pressure, the right points of opportunity and leverage to be able to get up and over? And so that, for me, was the way that I was able to innovate from within on a constant, agile Scrum, I was my own Scrum Master basis to do that. Oh, and one thing I also want to say about the creative process as well is that words are extremely powerful. And when I came to the US on a student visa from Japan to go to college, I didn't really know what I wanted to do because I was a classic STEM kid. I was really into math and science, but I was really into art and history and sort of the liberal arts. And Sony had just bought Columbia TriStar when I came to the States. Now you know how old I am. Sony had just bought Columbia TriStar. It was a huge debacle. And I thought, oh, and I wrote down Sony on a piece of paper, not really thinking anything of it. Fast forward, I ended up by a fluke, but I would say it was intention and putting words into the universe and the creative process. I ended up at Sony when Sony was trying to harness this thing called the internet. Now you really know how old I am. Okay. So from there, I went on to these various organizations, and today I'm a Group Vice President in New Ventures and Innovation at NTT. NTT is one of the largest technology services companies that you may not have heard about because we do a lot of the infrastructure. We do a lot of the digital plumbing. Obviously, that's not an official term. We don't say that in our press releases. But the point is, this kaleidoscope of technologies that you see up here are all things that I've dwelled in some point in time, and certainly in the role that I play at NTT today. And this is a Gartner kaleidoscope that says this is where the burst of technologies are taking us post-pandemic. So COVID-19 has digitized almost everything and digitalized the process by which we access all of this digitization of assets. And so, because this was something that I thought was fun, and this is also kind of the output from that many bottles of wine conversation 3 months ago, I was like, okay, can AI help us solve some of our key challenges? Because one of the things that I started to focus on is sustainability. And yes, sustainability is very much a buzzword right now, and ESG, and it has to be because it is a absolutely critical imperative. But how I got to this was by virtue of being a woman in tech. So I had been doing a lot around diversity in tech. We have a long way to go, right, ladies? Yeah. I know. We're all working on it in this room. And one of the things that I was focusing on in particular was about getting more women in the boardroom, because the boardroom is the pinnacle of power and decision making and how you move things forward. So as I was doing that, I was starting to see a lot more about ESG coming up, this acronym ESG, in these boardroom level conversations. And so as I was looking at this, I realized that sustainability, diversity, equity, inclusion is one part of the ESG. ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance. And you're going to start seeing it more and more in a lot of the official reporting from organizations, their ESG scorecard or anything else around that. So I started to focus a lot around sustainability, particularly as I was like, okay, this is a really interesting topic for my next book. I wrote a book 2 years ago about women on corporate boards. It was an Amazon bestseller, not because I wrote it, but because the stories in there, the women that I interviewed were just so fascinating, captivating. And thankfully, it did get translated into Japanese because the Japanese, my home country, definitely needs this kind of inspiration. But I started to think, okay, so sustainability, and I asked ChatGPT, how can ChatGPT help us solve for sustainability? Because it's a big, big problem. Now, fortunately, ChatGPT was not very helpful. It probably knew it wasn't being helpful because it referred to itself as a third person and saying ChatGPT thinks that, how we can help is things around information and education. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And then saying, well, we can help promote sustainable best practices. ChatGPT can promote sustainable best practices and give people insights on what's going on in other parts of the world. Okay, data analysis and decision support. Well, okay, that's because of the information and education that you're giving me. And then this one was really interesting, innovation and problem solving. And the ChatGPT said ChatGPT can provide a lot of the brainstorming elements that can make that happen, but it wasn't ChatGPT that's going to do the brainstorming. It was just going to equip us humans to figure out what kinds of kernels of ideas it can do. But here's the clincher. It ultimately said, while ChatGPT can provide valuable support, it's essential to recognize that solving sustainability challenges requires collective efforts involving individuals, organizations, governments, and technological advancements. AI can be a powerful tool to augment human capabilities, but ultimately, it is up to us. This is ChatGPT, so I'm like, okay. I know, it's like, I'm in it with you. To take action and implement sustainable practices at all levels. So, needless to say, I was pretty disappointed. I thought, well, what do you expect, right? So that was also partly why this argument of like, okay, what is AI and what is artificial AI? And the truth of the matter is, when I said earlier that sustainability is something that is of critical importance, and I can't underscore this enough aside from showing you this dramatic life cycle of where we've been. And so a lot of people say save the earth. Right? You've heard the earth is going to be fine, right? The earth has been around for billions of years. And it's gone through this geologic era and various periods of life, ice, hell, fire, what have you. And then we got to the point called Holocene, which is where the earth existed in equilibrium for many, 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 many years. And it was this equilibrium of just life thriving and biodiversity thriving and all of the different ways that we were living. And then what happened in the late 1890s was something called the Industrial Revolution. And then into the early 1900s, with the various wars, the world wars that were going on, there was this convergence of the Industrial Revolution starting to figure out how to drive the engines of growth, how to produce more, how to consume more, how to make greater efficiencies, how to build cars and manufacturing assembly lines, and how to create supply chains that were going to create a great deal of efficiency, and compound that with the almighty pursuit of GDP. So gross domestic product and growth of economy is what is getting us into this Anthropocene. And Anthropocene, anthropo being for human, means that we are in an era where we are materially impacting what the face of what this earth looks like in a very, very, very short period of time. Octopuses have been around for like 100,000 more years or some number like that than we have. We think that we have some sort of agency in the history of the earth when really we've just been a flash in the pan and we're already making an impact. So it's really important for us to figure out how we do that. And so all of us, many of us here who are technologists or in some way are involved in innovation, technology, and creativity, and Amy was asking the question earlier, is this inevitable? Is this inevitable where we're going to have chips put into our heads? Is this alignment and convergence with technology and silicon and digital? Is this the future that's ahead of us? And my contention is that that's not the question. I mean, it's a great question, Amy. Sorry. I mean, it is a fantastic question because it's good for us to think about what that is. And I think for me, it really is not that's a good question. And the question that I then take that and focus on is to say, what is it going to take for us to meaningfully address the 17 Sustainable Development Goals from the UN? And by the way, I think the UN, when they came out with this, I think it was 2016, might be a couple of years off. COVID has a nasty habit of having chopped up all the years and our memories on things. Anyway, So 17 goals, it's a great framework for us to think about what are the areas of focus and what's a barometer for me as an individual, innovate from within, and as a community of creative leaders, as companies and organizations, nation states, regions, whatever it takes. This is a great framework to think about how we solve for this. Now, never mind that I have submitted a formal request to the UN. I have a friend there, his name is Shivam. I said, can I submit a formal request to rewrite one of the UN SDGs? He's like, what do you mean? I said, well, UN SDG number 8. So what do you have against UN SDG number 8? I said, decent work and economic growth. First of all, what is decent work? And number 2, economic growth is what got us into this hot mess. That's my dad joke. Hot mess to begin with. It's this place that we're in now with global warming, climate change. And so, but the point is, regardless of whether we're converging with the Neuralink and Elon's going to put a chip in our heads or we're in singularity today, whatever it's going to take for us to get through these challenges that we have is going to require all of us working together and thinking about what we mean by intelligence. So we talked about innovation from within. I'm trying to live it each and every day. And the opportunity to be here today, thank you again so much, Mike and Maxim. It was kind of a last minute, but the opportunity for me through you, and hopefully meeting you later on, is an opportunity for me to constantly innovate through your energy, your ideas, and your feedback. And rethinking intelligence. So for those of you who haven't had a chance to think about intelligence in the world around you, this is a moment where I hopefully can shine some light. So this is Hamlet and Omelette. Those are real names, but these aren't the actual pigs. There were 4 pigs that were in this experiment in England in the late 1990s. Can't remember the other 2 pigs. I just thought Hamlet and Omelette was so cute, and they're right there anyway. So there were 4 pigs that demonstrated the ability to maneuver a joystick to play a video game to get the prize of food, right? You have bees, and bees are a big topic right now because they're an essential part of pollination and biodiversity and so on, the whole chain. But bees can recognize symbols, plus or minus symbols. They can also recognize color, again, with the intent and how to problem solve of how to get to another point. For those of you who watched The Last of Us and you're slightly traumatized by it, sorry, but the mycelia and mushrooms, mycelia are, and we still don't even understand the full extent of the intelligence of mushrooms and mycelia that are the deep roots that are under the ground. What we see of mushrooms that are above ground are not the mushrooms. It's a manifestation of one of the physiologies of mycelia. But mycelia under the ground have an intelligence of a network of being able to communicate with each other miles and miles away. And there's a plant in I think it's in the Amazon. It starts, the Latin name is Sophocles something else, but the Sophocles grabbed my attention because it's a plant that has above ground roots. And it lets its one side of roots die and the ones on the other side grow to tilt it forward. And so over time, imperceptible to our human eye, but over time that plant walks across the forest to find the most optimal sunlight and opportunity for photosynthesis. And never mind that for those of you that understand the intelligence of trees, similar to the mycelia, they have a network of being able to communicate with each other. And then this is my favorite. Partially, yes, okay, because a Japanese researcher came out with this, but in 2001, a Japanese researcher published an article in Nature magazine showing that slime, yes, slime is able to figure out the best way to maneuver through a maze. And if you left the slime long enough, it like creates something that looks remotely like the London Underground, or maybe even the New York, you know.
And the Japanese subway system.
And the Japanese subway system. But what was even more interesting than that the Japanese researcher noted was he said, you know, in all the commentary and criticisms that I got about my article, what was really fascinating was that the Japanese community were like, oh, I can do that because I'm Japanese. Oh, so, how are they doing this? Like, how is the slime figuring this out of having that level of perception and understanding? And the Western criticisms and researchers came back and said, is that even intelligence? So it was a really interesting contrast to see one side saying, okay, so let me understand what that intelligence is coming from, and the other side saying, is that even intelligence, or is it just programming? Which, by the way, I promise you, a lot of the things that we do each and every day is subconscious programming. But that's a whole nother talk for another time. For another time and another occasion. So after this evening of wines, actually it wasn't the next day because my head hurt the next day. It was probably about a week later that I started thinking about this concept of intelligence. And I thought, well, so if what we've made, all the computers, all the hardware, the software, all of this that's enabling AI to work comes from everything organic. It's come from us. Our harnessing binary code has come from us. You could say it came from a bigger intelligence, bigger than ourselves. But all of it comes from something that comes from organic. So it's not artificial, it's organic intelligence. And the other side of the coin is to say that nature has science, it has perfect ratios. You look at DNA, you look at all the different ways that I just told you about Omelette and Hamlet, and I'll probably name the bees after this talk because I feel like they should have a name too. All of these things have an intelligence that perhaps we have been so obsessed with digital and technology that we are ignoring what nature that's been around for millions of years can teach us about how to be a thriving, prosperous community, not just as humans, but alongside nature and the world around us. And just to go back to my Japanese roots, chise is one of the words for intelligence. And for any of you, perhaps some of you might know as well, we Japanese, we humbly took our characters from the Chinese, sorry. But we took the characters from the Chinese, and the Chinese too have a way of being able to express the same concept, but in different character forms to give different ideas around it. And so that's what we need to be open to and to think about what we mean when we think about intelligence. So I'll take your mind back to that flowing diagram of geologic ages that I talked about. And we've moved from the Holocene, where things were in equilibrium, beautiful equilibrium, to the Anthropocene, where we are meaningfully impacting the face of the earth physically and now virtually. And that's the piece here that I'm excited about. I'm very excited by the fact that we can no longer say it's a geologic age change. Yes, all the mining that's happening and all the different ways we're doing extraction from the earth is changing physically the face of the earth. But we have an opportunity that if Mark Andreessen said software is eating the world, I could say that organic intelligence gives us the opportunity to recreate the world. And so I think the era that we have an opportunity as a community to define is before us. So what happens after Anthropocene? My proposal is Cosmocene. Pythagoras called the universe a cosmos. It's a beautiful order. And that's what I think about when we have an opportunity to open our minds and think of another different way of thinking about how do we use intelligence. Not that AI is going to save us. Sustainer GPT failed. AI is not going to be the thing that's going to solve it. It's about us being able to think about all the intelligence that's around us and being able to harness it and make that happen. So my next book that I'm working on is, all right, I'm starting to palpitate because I'm so behind. This is helpful. It's putting the pressure on me. It's called Beyond the Black Swan. I'm writing about how the pandemic was this amazing crucible that accelerated through digital innovation the sustainability imperative. And so I'm still writing it. So if any of you have some ideas or thoughts that want to come talk to me, please do. It's a dialectic, right? It's all about bringing these different ideas forward. And so this is a topic that's very near and dear to me. And this whole idea of organic intelligence is really important. And I want to just also underscore that the innovation that happens from within and what we do with community, and then the intelligence and the way that we rethink it, is how we're going to be able to help advance new ways that we're going to achieve sustainable outcomes. Now, I flew in from Brussels, and I was feeling a little sorry for myself as I was shuffling off the plane, and then I remembered that my friend Pia, who's here today, just came from Australia 2 days ago, so she came much further than I have, but she's here to talk about what I'll come back to, the blue economy. She's doing remarkable work in the field of seaweed, and the ways that seaweed are going to be one of the ways that we're going to get to some incredible sustainable outcomes. So hopefully you have had a chance to rethink innovation from within, think about intelligence, and ultimately has to be about inspiration. And I know that that's one of the foundations of this conference, and kudos to Ada, Mike, Maxim, and the team for putting this together, because ultimately when you hear people like Andy and Amy and Sam and others talk, and we all talk amongst each other, inspiration is ultimately the energy that electrifies us to take action. And we might not all agree, but I think where we come to is being able to realize that the cosmos, we're all part of it. And so I thank you so much for today, and I'm happy to answer any questions. And thank you, Dankeschön, and arigatou gozaimasu.
Well, thank you so much. And I just wanted to know, how did you arrive, because the way you were thinking about your explanation of climate change and the economics behind it, I'm just curious, how did you arrive to this conclusion, and what was your thinking?
Which conclusion?
Like, perception of climate change I think I started studying econ, and I considered doing sustainability and thinking how businesses can join in the climate change. So I'm just curious, from the tech field, what was your journey to sustainability and
Yeah. So thank you. Part of it was just, as I mentioned, how diversity, equity, inclusion is the S in ESG. But to your point, what I didn't mention that's really critical is some people have said that technology is what is the energy, the voracious appetite that technology has around energy consumption is partly what's responsible for that. So data centers, right, and even just being able to run machines and systems and producing all this stuff is an extraction part of contributing to some of the things around waste, pollution, and climate change. And I think that for me, it's where technology is ultimately, it's not technology that's going to save us. It's really about using technology in a way that is going to be creative and thinking authentically around the intelligence around it. But I also am a firm believer that we don't even have that breakthrough yet. Like, there's a lot of work that's being done around photonics networking, which is using light and not electricity. So on-off binary, you can do that with light. Photonics in a way that's much more sustainable than what we have today. Quantum computing, right? Even though quantum computing in many ways is very energy intensive, but quantum computing is going to be one of the ways that we're going to be able to process a lot more information than what we can do today. And plus, there's, space exploration is another area that I think is really interesting, because if you put a data center up into space, you don't have to worry about cooling it because it's going to stay cool up there. Also,
data center under the water.
Data center under the water, yes, this is true. What was that?
Then it would heat the water.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a whole, so we would heat the water, Mike, come on.
No. I need to read about it.
So data center is you can talk to Mike, Mr. Powell. But ultimately, for me, it's I think that the technology and also part of what technology has enabled from a social justice piece is that it's really enabled access to a lot of information to people that didn't have it before. Right, so there was this during the pandemic, as everybody needed to be able to get online. Now you have communities of people that are able to share what their challenges are and to groupthink. And when I say groupthink, that I guess from Animal Farm, that's not a good thing. My point about that is as crowdsourced thinking, right? Because that's where breakthroughs happen and those EuRika moments happen. Where people can come together and think about that. So I think technology is also enabling that mesh of minds and intelligent nodes to be able to get through that breakthroughs. I don't know what that breakthrough is, but I think organic intelligence, i.e. AI, I'm still going to call it organic intelligence. It has something to do with it, and that's not just because I, trademarked the phrase. But no, it's and I only trademarked it because I want to be able to provoke conversation around it, right? It's the whole point. But I think that there's a great deal of responsibility and a great deal of responsibility that technology leaders have at this point to try to figure out how to solve for that. But to say something else about your point. So I think until about 10 years ago, sustainability was do good, right? You have to be green, you have to do good, otherwise, people make you feel guilty because you're harming the earth. Again, the earth will be fine. But I think what's happened is that people have materially tied sustainability components to risk. And that's why during the pandemic, you had a lot of people starting to do ESG funds. Because now any organization that had a level of responsibility and visibility into their ESG practices were better able to manage risk. And lo and behold, risk is everything to do with the thrivability of your business, sustainability of your business in that sense of the word. So in that way, there's this material tying of that. And on top of that, policymakers are starting to deploy compliance and regulation around it, thankfully. And I'm not pro or anti-regulation. That's not the thing but the point about regulation and why it's so important is because sustainability is not isolated. You as an organization or a company or a community can't think about sustainability in your backyard. Because the moment that you accidentally pollute your river, your part of the river in your backyard, which is what happened in Texas when Samsung accidentally leached a bunch of sulfuric acid into the river waterways in Travis, it impacted the whole community. So whether we like it or not, policy and regulation and funding from government is a necessary part of how that drives things forward. And companies and organizations don't have any other choice but to pay attention to the SEC when the SEC says, we're going to start capturing your carbon footprint on your financial reporting, things like that. So was that helpful? Okay, thank you.
So Rika could talk all day. Right? You're going to stick around for a little
Yes,
bit?
yes.
You have to answer questions?
Yeah.
Okay, Rika's questions will be $1,000. Thank you very much. Rika.
Thank you.